his whole approach is a far more dynamic and far more wider spread than what I usually am after. So he is a master of the digital way of shooting movies, which is not just technically different, but it's a whole different mode it's a whole different mindset, it's a whole different modus operandi. And I have very little experience in that. Then he's really an artist. He's a fabulously creative person, and he created a studio here, not out of a business consideration, but out of his passion and urge to make movies.
You have two people here, in James and in Robert, who are world creators. They've done it time and time again. And, you know, coming here and being on set, and, you know, as soon as I arrived in Austin and was walking around, I was like, wow, you know, they've done it again. They've created this new world. It doesn't quite feel like anything I've seen before, but, you know, it has all of Robert's characteristics and trademarks, and, you know, the script is everything that we would expect from Cameron. I look at, you know, the rest of the cast. I can't speak for myself, but, you know, Christoph Waltz, Mahershala Ali, you know, Rose is one in a million, you know. Keean is such an amazing young actor, so it's a mouth-watering proposition, you know, and even being a part of it, I can't wait to see it, you know, even just to see what my character looks like, because I've been running around in grey pyjamas with motion capture dots all over me, so I can't wait to see how it turns out. Iron City is a place of, you know, it's a desolate place. It's a place that people have been forced to, and, you know, have migrated to from all over the world, and are living on top of each other in squalor. It's a difficult place, you know. There's a lot of crime and unrest, and there's no sort of police force that run the Iron City as such, or no, or rather it's run from, you know, from upstairs, as it were, from a distance. So you have these hunter warriors who are basically a law unto themselves, running around, you know, fulfilling bounties and taking people out when they're deemed to have done criminal acts. So it is it's a place that I wouldn't want to live in real life. Not one bit. Zapan is such an interesting character. He's this ostentatious, not quite eccentric, but kind of theatrical character who is, you know, one of these badass hunter warriors. But then you see the rest of the hunter warriors, and they're all, you know, dirty and rusty, and they have all these weapons all over them, and, you know, they're part cyborg or whatever. But me, you know, as a Zapan rather, he is head to toe cyborg with this beautiful, ornate metal body, which he's clearly spent a lot of money on, and spends a lot of time on his appearance. So you have in this rusty, kind of dirty place, you have this one clean person. So Zapan really stands out, you know. Part of what comes with that exterior is vanity, and I'm not sure about an arrogance, because he is this interesting mix of the ego and insecurities. And when they collide, you know, it's a dangerous mix for everyone around them. And he is a dangerous person to be around. But as a character to play, he's so fun. I think he's the funnest character I've ever played. I think what's great about it is it's not playing up to this notion of, you know, what we call modern femininity or anything. It's not a movie about a female hero or heroine, rather, at all. It's just our hero is a woman. And that's what my normal life is like. I know so many women who are, you know, heroes and leaders and you know, and ruling, you know, in every sense. And that should be represented in cinema. Man, this is gonna be, it's gonna be epic. It's gonna be truly epic, but it's humble. You know, it kind of is a boy meets girl story. Is a, you know, coming of age story. It's kind of a love story in a sense, but you know, aside from that, there's just it's such a spectacle. So I want people to feel like they've been on a roller coaster, but I want that roller coaster to have the dynamics of a good roller coaster, which is the loops, but then the calm, quiet, you know. So I think it's going to have highs and lows.
I completely forgot about being EIZA, and I was so herself and the way that I was moving, and it's exciting. You become an animal. You go more into your animalistic side as a person and sort of unwind, and people were so excited. I mean, our camera guys were like, I had worked with them for 4 seasons, and they were like, that's amazing. Wow, the gifts of Robert Rodriguez are just completely endless. The talents and the gifts. First and foremost, I think that him as a human being is the kindest, sweetest person you could ever work with. He likes to work as a team. He respects the actor's opinion. He wants to hear your thoughts. He wants to make you feel comfortable. He's always open for new ideas. He's always excited. It's crazy to work with someone who has such a long career and so many, you know, he started as an independent filmmaker, and I don't know how many years later, he's still an independent filmmaker. Alita is a role model I think women need to have out there. I think Alita represents what it is to be a young woman, what it is to be a young woman in a hard world. I think she represents what it is to be a form of minority. She represents what really is happening in the world. And it's rare that we get these female characters that embody and you see them turn into a beautiful butterfly, and by themselves, which I thought that was the beauty about this story. You see her get guidance, but not help, and that's what I loved about her, and that's what I think people will feel extremely inspired by it. I think Rosa just killed it, you know. Rosa is a very perfectionist kind of actress, and that's why she was perfect at it, because she is Alita. You know, the way that she approached the process, she wanted to do the best every moment. And it's rare that you get actresses that are that young, and especially when you're doing motion capture. She was just a perfectionist. If she was skating, and she was skating on the scene, she didn't care if she had 45 cameras on top of her. She wanted to do it. She wanted to be there.
The biggest thing with Robert was he really wanted to make sure whoever the actress was, which we weren't even officially, we officially didn't know yet. We just wanted to make sure we were able to capture a performance on set that he was able to direct, so that whatever the actress was, we were able to capture exactly what he was seeing, and we were going to be able to put that back on the screen for him later on. The big difference we can make on performance capture like this is because we have such a high fidelity mocap, and we capture so much detail, that we can bring simple things to life, simple things that happen on screen. For example, today I was looking at some capture of Rosa and Hugo is changing her skate. And in the simple motion of Hugo taking her skate off and Rosa just reacting to that, you could actually see her whole leg move, and then you could see her hip being pulled a little bit, and you could actually see it all the way up into her head position and her shoulder. And it's the little details like that that we're able to bring to life, and you can see in the character, once it's a CG character, and you can see that extra detail that just brings it from a robotic CG character to Rosa, or to a LETTERI character, or to Caesar. You can actually see the actor in that character, and it brings that extra bit of life to the shots. A lot of it is our mocap crew, which we have guys that actually capture the mocap itself, the performance capture itself, adjusting cameras, making sure that everything's aimed at the right place. We have other people that actually they're like a script supervisor. They're watching every take, finding out what worked, what didn't work, just ingesting all the data for us. We have a facial performance capture, which he basically just runs around with a little computer, and it's attached to the little camera Rosa wears right here to always capture her face, to make sure the dots are all in the right place and that we're capturing all the right information for Rosa's facial capture. And then we have our typical on-set crew, which is capturing the photos of everything, HDRI, things like that. And our scanning crew, who actually scan every environment so that we end up with a 3D model for every set that we shoot in. Grewishka is huge. I mean, he's got 3 incarnations, 8 feet and 9 feet tall, and he's played by Jackie, who is 5'4" maybe, and it's great because Jackie plays it as a big guy. He really, when he starts moving around, you would buy him as a 8-foot tall character. He's really practiced, and he's got that the feel of a really big guy, and it's great to see him do it. The design itself, I mean, there's a lot of work to go in the different details in Grewishka, because he has a lot of mechanics to him that really have to be worked out to let him move his head around. There's a lot of pistons and things in his neck. There's a lot of detail that really has to be moved around and worked out before we really get something that works great. Zapan, I think, is going to be a great character, mainly because Ed is such he was so great on screen. The fact that we're going to keep Ed's face, he had such great facial posture, and his just body language when he's fighting, or even when he's just walking down the street, you buy him as a robot for some reason. Ed there was something about him on screen that really, you could see him even in the mocap suit, you could see him as a really cool cyborg. His cyborg design is also really interesting because he's got lots of holes in him so that you can see the negative space in him, which is I think really necessary so that you just know he's not a guy in a suit. With the negative space, you obviously instantly know he's a cyborg, and you know that it's just a cool character. For us, the manga is really the guideline. The manga is, a lot of the drawings are very simple, but they sell the idea. So the manga is the comics. We have them pinned all over our walls at work already, and we always try to keep the manga pinned up next to the artwork for the character, so that you just know the two, and you know what the intention was from the manga and where the artwork was. And Lightstorm's done a really great job of pushing the manga designs into the artwork. And our animation team is actually trying to follow the same ideas, because you see poses in the manga that you wouldn't have thought about. So we're doing a lot of the motorball as we speak, and the poses throughout the manga are really put the characters in these cool action poses that our animation team is trying to actually follow as many of those as we can too, so that we just try to bring them. I mean, Robert's original intention was to just, the first movie to really bring manga to life.
I can't wait to see how they're able to capture, whatever it is that we've done, and how they're going to make our characters look. From what I understand, they're trying to make the guys, they're going to make the head on this thing look pretty much like this head. I think it's supposed to be a lot bigger and probably have some differences, but it should look like me. And Alita should look like Rosa. The technology does a lot more than just capture motion. It literally captures emotion. It captures performance. We've got a lot of tracking dots that are on our face, and we're wearing a helmet that has a camera. And the camera's kind of like this wide angle thing that's really, it's kind of really a bizarre, like too wide of an angle, but it's just capturing what's going on with our face, right? Then they've got these reference monitors, as well as what the movie camera is seeing, that they can actually see, even though we kind of look ridiculous with our little helmets. You can still see what we're doing, how, with our thought processes, our the performance, and so every time, I've had a great time working with Rosa, and it is kind of a trip how her and I have to be able to look at each other and imagine, that we're going to be these two other characters. But in acting, acting really is reacting. And, Rosa's a phenomenal actress. So when we're playing across from one another, we're able to kind of tap into each other's energy as we're reacting and emoting with one another. And, these characters, while I'm still going to be this insanely massive 9-foot-tall, super broad-shouldered cyborg, it's still going to be my face. It might be a much bigger head, but it's going to be my face, as good as Avatar look. It's kind of bizarre when you talk about like the approach to performing. A lot of it boils down to, ultimately it's the same. You're acting, you're reacting, you're trying to kind of get to this, natural place and to do this scene. But, playing a 9-foot-tall robot, or cyborg or whatever, I mean, a lot of times, there's been times where we're doing a scene and there's a guy behind me carrying this pole with a tennis ball on the end of it. And Rosa's standing over there, and she needs to look up at that tennis ball. And so I'm performing here, and I'm looking at her ankles. you know. So that kind of, you know, it's not as, it's fun when we're able to look each other in the face, because then again, that's, to me, it's much easier to react than it is to act. But sometimes as actors, you have to, like, you know, put a little piece of tape on something and there's your eye line and you just have to, you know, pretend. Grewishka is this interesting character. He's only ever, up to a point in his life, you know, he had been born basically in the sewers, in the underworld. And he was pretty much abandoned there. So he had this horrible life. You know, he knew there was an above, but I think at one point in time he kind of got up to a sewer drainage ditch and was noticed by some young kids above the surface. And they basically just abused him and burnt the crap out of him, and he was left to die. So he's had this really tortured, miserable life. But before succumbing to, you know, dying in the underworld from these horrible burns, Nova discovered him and empowered him, turned him into a very powerful 9-foot-tall cyborg so that he could play in the motorball games. And Vector took a very strong interest in Grewishka, and Grewishka was a rising star. He was finally getting what he had always wanted in life, to have a life, to be alive, and to be noticed. And he got up to the final match where he was going to be the victor, but he lost. And when he lost when he lost Motorball and he lost the champion, what happened to him is what happened to so many people who have lost, that have been built into these powerful things. They're just kind of left out on the street. And so Vector found another way to use Grewishka, and that was to get Grewishka to, you know, find unsuspecting cyborgs and basically kill them so that he could harvest them for parts for Vector to use on other champs that they're trying to build to be the strongest motorballer. And so that's basically what Grewishka's gig now is. He's out harvesting parts from other cyborgs. Grewishka has a real problem with proficient hunter warriors, and Dr. Ido is one of those. And Grewishka kind of lays out a trap for him one night when he's kind of notices he's heading in a certain direction. And that's where Grewishka, along with a couple of accomplices, basically catch him and blindside him, ambush him basically in an alley. And the gig is up for Ido at that point, because, you know, Grewishka's been after him for a while and he wants to kill him dead, so he'll stop, you know, going after cyborgs, because Grewishka wants to go after those cyborgs and harvest those parts. But Alita, whom Grewishka has not met, just pops into the scene because she was following Ido. And so suddenly Grewishka and his two accomplices have a real problem. The person I've probably worked with the most is Rosa, and she's an awesome actress. I mean, it was really neat that when we had that first day of doing motion/performance capture, and it was during pre-production, so really kind of got to know her on those few days, and I think we were both just really excited to be part of this, you know, wearing our little Teletubby outfits and looking really ridiculous and having to commit and own these scenes. But she's a phenomenal actress. I think she's just nailing this, and I can't wait to see her performance that we're gonna get to see through this CG world stuff, because I just know it's gonna be there, and it's gonna be Rosa, and it's gonna look awesome.
Well, in the world of the 26th century, the world of Alita, Battle Angel, It's 300 years after a huge war has devastated the planet, and there's been a plague weapon that's been used, and only a tiny, tiny percentage of humanity survived, and all the survivors streamed to the one remaining sky city that existed. The apex of civilization was represented by these sky cities. So people streamed from all over the world. Somehow they managed to get there, and they formed a giant refugee camp in the shadow of this sky city that floats, you know, a mile or so above them in the sky. And they could never get there because they had severed the connection to the ground, from Zalem to the ground. As a result of the plague, they had isolated themselves. So even though everybody gathered there, there was no relief from it other than they had each other. So they created a city basically out of nothing, and now we're 300 years later, and it's a thriving place. It's got a lot of energy, but it's a very dangerous place. I like Alita because she's absolutely fearless. And it's actually interesting writing a character that has no fear. She has no fear. If she you know, her motto, her kind of life motto is, I will not stand by in the presence of evil. She can't not do something when she's confronted with an injustice. She will do something. It's just who she is. And she's absolutely unafraid. It doesn't matter how big the opponent is or how powerful or how menacing. She just goes right at it. Now, that's a hard character to write because you have to find the vulnerability. Well, her vulnerability is all about the people that she loves. She will never fear for herself, but she will fear for them. And then, and only then, is she afraid, or is she stressed by something that might happen. So it's all about the bonds that she forms after she awakens in her new body, and how she fights for the people that she loves, and then, you know, the betrayals and the things that she learns about kind of the darker side of human nature. She's just a wonderful character. You know, I think that she represents, I think, a certain kind of female empowerment that we need in films. You know, it's an empowerment of her internal psychological and spiritual character, not just her physical strength. And yes, she's remarkably strong for her size. She's also a character that people underestimate. They always underestimate her. She even underestimates herself. You know, one of the things she says at some point early in the film is, I'm just an insignificant girl. They threw me away with the rest of the garbage, because she's literally found, literally physically found in a garbage heap. But it's very easy to underestimate a little pipsqueak, you know, 4'7" or whatever she is, young teenage girl, until she goes into action, until she transforms into, she doesn't physically transform, but she mentally transforms into some version of herself that clearly she was in the past. He's been like a kid in a candy shop with this movie. He loves the process, he loves the performance capture, he loves the design elements, you know, and so he was always very, very respectful of what I had written and of the world that Kishiro had created. But he's also not afraid to make it his own, you know, and I wanted to give him as much space as he needed creatively, and I was emphatic about that from the beginning. So we fell into this really good working relationship, because we'd been friends for 20 years, but we'd never really worked together. And it turns out that he's like insanely collaborative. He really likes the camaraderie of working with other creative people. Weta does the best facial animation, CG animation, the most human, the most alive, the most emotional, and the most real of anybody out there. Some of the other, you know, houses are starting to catch up now, but Weta's been the leader in this for a long time. It's why we went with them on Avatar. They broke ground with the Gollum character in The Lord of the Rings, with King Kong, and then with all of the Avatar characters. They really just for years have held the lead in this area. And so I knew that Alita had to be done with them in order to create the reality in her face. Because like any movie where your main character is actually done through CG, and of course it's performance capture, so there's an actor, and you know, Rosa Salazar is fantastic. I mean, she is our greatest asset, I think, on this movie. But it's all about this. If you can make the audience believe that that character is real in a tight close-up, and frankly, Weta are the only people that I trusted to be able to do that. It's pretty hard to quantify how big the reaction was that Robert and I both had to Rosa. I mean, she just came in the normal sort of process of casting, and she just started to emerge out in front of everybody else as an actor who put such heart, such emotion, and such vitality into every moment. You know, when you see 10 actors all read the same scene, and you look at them back to back, and then you see one who makes not just every line count, but every moment between the lines count, and is shifting and has these complex reactions, and is surprised and is earnest and heartfelt. I mean, I've never seen anything like it out of a young actor her age. And I think she's just phenomenal. I think she really is phenomenal. And Robert and I both believed in her right from the start, but it's one of those things where you kind of don't quite believe what you've got, and you've got to see other people. So we continued to see other actresses, and nobody came close. And so then we started reading some of our potential Hugos with Rosa, and she was so giving, just off camera. She drew out the best out of these young actors, and that allowed us to find a great Hugo. You know, I think that was the smartest thing that we did, was to really spend time on that process, because the love story is all about the chemistry. It's about, do you care about these people? And it's going to be amazing seeing Rosa's spirit, her light, come through the Alita character.
I have a daughter, and I like the idea that there are, you know, powerful, strong, there's stories about powerful, strong girls out there for girls to see, for everyone to see. She doesn't only have to be sweet and loving, you know. She is flawed, and she is she's wild, and she's smart, and she's strong, and she's powerful, and you know, she can be angry and vicious, and she can be all sorts of things. She doesn't have to only be, you know, sweet and demurring. She's a warrior, you know, and she gets the job done. Rosa's great. She's really open, and has a kind of pure energy to her. I don't really know how to articulate it, other than it's very visceral and immediate, and quite powerful. She's those really expressive eyes, and an incredible voice. Really mesmerizing. And yeah, she has a very powerful presence, enough to make me completely forget that she was dressed in a gray suit and had black dots drawn all over her face with little cameras mounted on her head. Somehow they managed to not be a distraction at all in the face of her presence. Robert brings a kind of a little bit of a playfulness, like a sense of fun, and a little bit of humor, and to something of this scale, of this sort of epic scale that we associate with Jim Cameron. Like I think Alita also has that. It has these moments that are really humorous and a little bit dark and a little bit kind of unexpected and subversive, and then it has this, at the core of it, these sort of sweeping ideas that are topical and kind of feel like they're speaking to things that are happening in the world today.
The most important thing about a character is the performance, and we were really lucky because John had locked in on Rosa Salazar early on, and he showed me the screen test, and I thought she was just a great choice for it. She really brought a lot of emotion and sparkle, to the character. Because when you're translating a character, especially from a 2D graphic that everyone's familiar with, you have to find that something extra that brings it alive. And Rosa really did that. She had that sense that this is a character who's trying to find herself, and it really becomes about her and her relationship, with the people around her, and her learning who she is. And that's how you hang everything on that. Then the rest of it is kind of cosmetic. You want to honor the design that you have from the graphics, from the comics. You want to make sure that what Rosa is doing kind of can translate through all that you get this marriage between what the character is supposed to be in our imaginations and what the performance is in its reality. And the idea is just bringing those two together. So we went through a lot of iterations on Alita to try to find that right balance, Alita's eyes are an important part of her character. The way she is drawn, the way she's designed, is she has overly large eyes, and we kind of rationalized that as part of her character, being that she was designed as a warrior, that it would give her, essentially super sight, and that became part of her character, and so it amplified the detailed movements that we were able to pick up from Rosa's performance, and really use that to help draw you into the character. We want the reality of it. Typically, when you do keyframe, you're working at a gestural level, and kind of, the in-betweens kind of, come and go there for timing, but you're really looking for the major beats. But if you really look at how people move, everything overlaps constantly in dialogue as well as motion. So performance capture gives you that both for the body and the weight, and also for the liveliness and the realism of the expressions. It's been great working with Robert, because that sort of impulse that he brings to filmmaking has really been terrific, especially when we were shooting, because we wanted to see if all these tools that we had built up, which are highly technical, would actually hold up in that kind of run and gun style of shooting. So we were happy to see that they did. And Robert looks for the moment, and he looks for the realism of the moment, and that's carried us through even into the post-production and following through with looking at the character she's developed. Motorball was a combination of a lot of previs, a lot of keyframe animation, and performance capture, because we'll still use performance capture wherever we can for key beats, and that really was especially true for Alita. But there were tests done with skaters early on to try to figure out what that motion was, and we captured a bit of that. And so it's always like you'll pull whatever techniques you need to to kind of make it work. But it was trying to set up this sort of super fan idea that you had this stadium that you've never seen anything like it before, with this really high-speed, dangerous action going on, and trying to fit that all together into keeping it real, keeping it grounded, because it was meant to be a sport that had been played for hundreds of years in this arena that, was showing a lot of wear and tear just because it was Iron City. It wasn't a super fantastic place anymore. It needed to be grungy and dirty, but still fast and dangerous. I'm hoping they enjoy Alita's performance, because to me that is the heart and soul of the film, and just hoping they don't think about it, that once you see her and are introduced to her, she is just part of the world of the film, because that's really what we're after. The idea is to make it look like we were out there, 300 years in the future with cameras, and we just shot this movie, and here it is.
How Lightstorm first learned of Alita Battle Angel was through a friend of ours, Guillermo del Toro. And he brought to Jim's attention the anime first. And we fell in love with the story of the anime. At the heart of the world that Kishiro had created is this young, innocent girl who has to discover who she is in the story that he created, in a world that was so unique. Oftentimes, animes or mangas are set in a very Asian-specific world. Kishiro wrote the story actually to take place in a universal world where Iron City is a melting pot of all societies from around the world that come to gather there, speaking different languages. So he really opened the door for a cinematic translation of Iron City. It's an origin story of a young female protagonist who has no memory of who she is and who comes into this world thinking of herself as someone who is insignificant, and as the line says in the movie, and thrown out with the trash. And she comes to discover that inside of her is a hero. And that's a message for everybody, that inside of them can also be a hero. It took Jim 5 years to get to a script that he was ready to make. At that same time, however, we looked at the landscape of technology and felt that we could maybe make a movie that Jim had conceived 10 years earlier, which was Avatar. And Jim now had a very tough decision, and it was a tough decision for him, which movie to do, Alita or Avatar. One of the reasons that Jim ultimately chose Avatar is because he thought that by doing Avatar first, the technology that we would learn on that film would benefit Alita in a greater fashion. In fact, having done Alita now, what we have learned is that doing Alita and what we've learned on that is going to have an even greater impact on the Avatar sequels. Jim Cameron is known for his strong female heroines. Alita falls exactly into that tradition. Jim's female heroines are not superheroes. They're real heroes. And that's what Alita is. And she becomes someone that people can identify with, but still aspire to be. And just like Ripley or Neytiri, Alita is that iconic of a character. Once we made Avatar and we realized that we were going to be making several sequels, we knew that Jim in the short term was not going to have a chance to direct Alita. So we started to touch base with certain directors that we were excited about. But we couldn't find the right person for a number of years that we would share the parenting of our child, Alita, until Jim had a social lunch with Robert Rodriguez. And at the end of that lunch, Robert said to Jim, Jim, if you're going to be doing Avatar for the foreseeable future, what happens to other projects like Alita? and a light bulb went off on Jim's head. I said, do you have 15 minutes? And Jim brought Robert back inside, and he showed him an art reel that we had created in 2005 for Alita. And Robert got so excited by what he saw. He knew a little bit about the property. He knew there was something Jim was going to do. And Jim said, here, I'm going to give you the script that I wrote that I'm happy with. It was way too long. It was 186 pages. And Jim said, if you could bring it down to a shooting length, you can direct it. On top of that, Jim gave Robert over 600 pages of notes for the story. Robert looked at the work and looked at Jim in the eye and said, I'm not going to rewrite you because you don't rewrite Jim Cameron. I'm going to edit you. And Robert went away with no deal in place, on spec. And he worked on the script, and he edited the script down to a manageable length. And when we got it back, and Jim and I both read the script, we were both shocked that we weren't missing anything from the longer script. We knew things had been taken out, but the core important themes, the character moments, were all there. And that told us that Robert was the right person to parent this child with. Alita is a cyborg. Cyborgs are not robots. Cyborgs are augmented humans. And Alita's journey is really discovering what does it mean to be human. And being human is having a heart and caring. Caring about someone as a parent, caring about someone as a lover. It's about caring about the world you're in. And Alita discovers that. And that is such a universal message. There were 5 great sky cities around the equator on the Earth. Cities that floated in the sky, connected by a space elevator up to them. During the war, 4 of those cities fell, and only 1 remained, the one above Iron City. Masses of population from around the rest of the world at the end of the war came and gathered under Iron City, in its shadow. Iron City existed in a lap of luxury above the city below that was squandering for their survival. And it would take and pillage things from below. Workers down below had to provide Iron City with all of their goods. And all Iron City would do in return is dump its garbage on Iron City. But Iron City is a place where many of the humans have accepted their existence and still find joy without all the necessities that we might have in the 20th century. They find joy in each other. They find joy in the sports that they play. So it's not a life where you have a post-apocalyptic world. That happened centuries before our movie opens. This is a world that exists today on our planet Earth and is relatable to people as we go through our story. The city above Iron City is Zalem. It is always forever out of the reach of the people in the lower world. It's the promised land to them. They aspire to get there. And people are often filled with false dreams of being able to get there, when in fact they can't. In our world, the only way for someone to truly get to Zalem is to win the Motorball Championship and be invited there by the Zalemites to go up there. The unique thing about how we're portraying Iron City is while for many people living in a Western world, it might look like an impoverished city, we see the city through Alita's eyes as she goes through this world for the first time. And she only sees joy and wonder in this world. And it is a great metaphor and a learning lesson for us about what are those things that are important in a world. And by being able to go through Iron City and to see fruit stands on the street and taxi cabs going by and kids playing on the street, it makes it relatable for anybody in today's world, no matter in what country they live, no matter in what city they live. Alita is found in the scrapyard of Iron City, dropped as part of the garbage from Zalem above. And she's discovered by a cyber doctor named Ido. Ido sees her core, just a torso of a young 13-year-old or so girl in this scrap heap. And he goes over to her, and he's amazed to find out that she's alive. And he brings her back to his workshop. And he goes down into his basement, and he brings up a beautiful porcelain-like body that he's going to attach the cyber core to. It's a body that he had once built for his 12-year-old paraplegic daughter, but never got a chance to complete it in time before she tragically died. So the story becomes really Ido's second chance at fatherhood and Alita's journey of self-discovery. Alita comes into this world with no memory of who she is. One of the driving forces through her story is trying to discover her past and where did she come from. And as it turns out, only certain situations can spark those memories for her. And she doesn't know quite what those are, so she continues to try and seek out things that will let her know more of her past. If anybody asks me, about the timing of making Alita, it's not the technology that was so important. It was finding Rosa Salazar to play the character of Alita. Because neither Jim nor I could imagine anyone else today playing that role. Rosa came in and auditioned for Robert in a private audition with him, and Robert shared the audition tape with us. And he said to us that Rosa actually made him cry in the room. And Jim and I saw her tape, and we thought, she's it. But we also knew we had the responsibility to continue to explore. And we did for several months. And ultimately, we set up an old-fashioned screen test with Rosa and 2 other actresses. And we spent a whole day shooting their scenes, separately, of course. And when we just watched the footage back on the big screen, there was no question of who was born to play Alita other than Rosa Salazar. The biggest challenge of this film, from a design standpoint, was the character of Alita herself. We wanted to hold true as much as we could to the manga character that Kishiro had created. We went through a very lengthy design process of the character without knowing who the actress was who was going to be playing her. And that enabled us to get into great detail on her initial body, what I refer to as the doll body, with the porcelain inlays and all the detail that Ido spent in preparing the body for his daughter, to the berserker body and its futuristic style that Alita ultimately adopts into. But it wasn't really until we cast Rosa that we could finalize the most important element of the design, the face. We had learned from Avatar the importance of incorporating the design of the actor playing the character into the design of the character if we wanted all of the emotion to come through. So we used Rosa's face as inspiration to ultimately evolve Alita's face into. We would do a complete scan of Rosa's head. We would build Alita's head in 3D. We would mold and model that.
Hugo was born in Iron City, and he had a tough situation with his dad growing up. He didn't have much family other than that. So he's kind of had to be a hustler and kind of make his own way, and was on his own at a very early age in his life and had to watch his father pass away. So I think he's kind of just this, he's given this, he's put in this world, and he kind of just has to deal with it and figure out a way to survive, and also try to make a living and try to make his mark in this kind of like tough world. In this world, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there was a huge war, and there was a bunch of sky cities in the sky, and that was just where people lived, and people don't really know how they stand up, the foundation, or how it's made up, but that's where everyone lived, just in these sky cities. And after the war, there's only one sky city left, and that's Solemn. So everything else is just kind of the slums and the underbelly of this masterpiece in the sky, which is Solemn. It's a melting pot of everyone, every type of person that inhabits Iron City. I mean, you have cyborgs, and then you have regular humans, and then you have people that have come in from the Badlands, which are the outskirts of Iron City. Anyone could, if there was something wrong with their arm or their leg, they'd be able to replace that with a robot part, making them cyborg. So they're still human. They still have a human brain, but the heart can be different. So the inner core could be completely different. The legs and the arms and almost every part of the body could be robotic, but there's still that human part, which is the brain. So there's human blood and also cyborg blood, which is blue, which courses through their body. I've never quite had an experience like Robert. Robert will, I feel like I've worked with a lot of directors, and I feel like a lot of directors feel like after every take they need to come and give you a note, or they need to come and make sure they're like, that was really good or something. Robert will say one tiny little he won't talk to you for like an hour, and then he'll come up to you and he'll say something so profound that it will change the entire way that you look at the scene. I feel like Alita, of all, like that, as far as strong female leads, because not only is it this strong, like, beautiful character, it's also this girl will get scrappy and will, she won't, let things slide, and throughout the whole film you see just this, she has, Alita has no fear. She has this beautiful fighting technique, and on top of that, she's this beautiful woman with just really crazy, profound things to say. When I first found out that it was Rosa, of course, I looked at her picture, and I was like, of course, this is Alita. Like, no one else could play it. And I also loved her work previously. And she was just telling me the other day, this is her third post-apocalyptic film. She's just kind of being fit into this genre of, like, she's the post-apocalyptic girl, the rebel. But what's so important, especially for us, was to have a chemistry. And I think that's what the whole test was about. It was just us seeing if we could get along and seeing how we worked and vibed off each other. I think when people see the movie, they'll be able to watch it and they'll still be able to see Rosa, and be able to be like, oh, that's Rosa Salazar. I think it's only going to be weird for me because I spent 4 months looking at Rosa, and so when I see, Alita with her hair and everything, because Rosa wears a helmet with a camera on it, so when I see her, like, beautiful flowing hair, like in our kissing scene on the bridge, when I had to go in and kiss her, I thought it'd be really sweet if I like moved her hair behind her ear or something like that. So obviously I couldn't move her real hair, so our hairstylist Charles put this like little stringy bit of hair on her side, and then I like pushed this little bit of string behind her ear, and then obviously in the film it will be me like actually pushing real hair behind. So that's gonna be weird for me, just because I know what went into making it.
I always wanted to work with Robert Rodriguez, and then the fact that James Cameron was attached and had been working on it for quite some time was even more attractive, because you would be out of your mind if you didn't want to work with James Cameron in some capacity. So maybe I'll get to do that in the future in terms of him directing, but I'd worked on a project with Robert several years prior where he was in that producing position, and so now I finally get to experience, you know, working opposite of him as an actor, and him obviously directing. And I'm really happy with getting to collaborate with him. He's got such a wonderful energy, a very young energy. He's like a kid getting in there and excited to kind of tweak the scenes, and he can do everything. Vector likes control. He's not one who appreciates a wild card. He needs things to go exactly as planned. And he's very much one who is about a controlled chaos. And Alita is too much of a wild card for him. Just in approaching playing Vector, I don't want to try to create something that isn't really there. And trying to just put another layer on top of it, because if anything, then that can get in the way of the natural flow of that character. And so just commit to what's there and let my instincts take me where they take me. And if he's a bad guy, it's got to be because people think he's a bad guy. Like, I can never go into it thinking of these characters as a bad guy. But if anything, I can think of Vector as being someone who enjoys control, who feels alive when things are going as planned. And what dictates what the plan is? The plan is dictated by someone who is above him. So having someone to answer to means that he can justify it, because that is the authority, that is the government, that is everything. There isn't a power outside of, at least of that world, outside of his bosses, you know? And so in his mind, he feels like, well, either you're gonna be of the many have-nots or of the handful of haves. Robert is a terrific director, and he's really excited and passionate about this story. And then also, if you add, you know, James Cameron's effort and presence in it as well, the way that they've collaborated on it, and I just think there's just a joy for this kind of work. Like, this is what they do, you know. And I think the two of them together, the two teams working in this capacity, I think it stands to be something that could be really enjoyable and really entertaining.
Alita is completely CG, computer generated in the film, and she, Rosa Salazar, who appears as Alita and plays Alita, is in a performance capture suit all the time in this movie. We never see her in a costume. We never see her as the final character that she's going to be in, except for on our monitors. But when she appears to everybody working on the stage, she's wearing a gray suit with the markers. We capture her motion almost everywhere with performance capture cameras, including her face, and get all of her performance. And sometimes we don't quite have the cameras there, but we have other reference cameras pointed towards her, plus almost all the time have the facial camera on her. We're still getting her performance. So on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it just looks like she's an actress and she's doing her job, although she's got a funny camera in front of her. I'm sure you've got footage of this stuff. But you can't see anything special. There's a bunch of reference cameras always pointing at her to help the technical implementation end of it. But that's it. The goal is to get Rosa's performance totally into this character. You know, nothing to be missed. Further, actually, I will add that I think we're going to see some of the shapes and forms of Rosa's face in our character. There are certain aspects of her face that I hope will be translated, and is a goal. She has a couple dimples that form in certain expressions. We hope we'll pop that in. So it's even more Rosa than just her performance mapped onto some other thing. In this case, I think you're going to see in Alita, in the movie, parts of Rosa, and certainly all her action. You know, all her skin action, and voice, and you know, eyes, and all that will be, and it'll end up in the film for sure.
What I love about Alita and how different she is from superhero films that are so popular right now is that she has super abilities in a way because she's of a technology that no longer exists, but she's just a hero. She's someone who becomes a hero. She's not a superhero per se. She doesn't have special powers. She has unique abilities and fighting capabilities because of when she was created and born, but she has a human brain and human emotions, and she's someone, unlike a lot of superhero stories are about characters who may have a good heart, but they become warriors, find their warrior spirit. She's already a warrior. She's already the best. She just needs to remember that. But more than that, she needs to her discovery is of her own heart and her own sort of morality and humanity that she never had as a warrior. So that's kind of the twist on this story. Different even from Jim's other characters, female character protagonists like Sarah Connor and Ripley, where you have them transform into the warrior. This girl is a warrior. She was born a warrior. And so it's cool to see her remember that and unleash that, but then to now have something behind it because she, through her relationship, she becomes human. You can identify with this girl's journey because of who she is and the humanity that she represents. Just like you don't have to be British to watch James Bond. Making it so specific, it becomes more universal. And that's what Jim taps into in his female protagonist and in Alita, is the universality of what the character is going through. That you can watch this and completely identify with it and feel like it's your journey as well, even though it's a cyborg girl from Mars. So that's the magic of Jim. He really wanted me to make it my movie, and I kept encouraging him to make it his too, because I want to make a Jim Cameron movie. I make my movies all the time. I wanted to make something that resembled more of a Jim Cameron movie by grounding it more in reality the way he does, by really honoring his style, because that's what I would have wanted to see. I wanted to see Jim Cameron's Alita, not the Robert Rodriguez Alita movie. I wanted to see Jim Cameron's version, like what I read in the script, because it was so well laid out in the script. So I really wanted to shoot it very similar to how he would do it. What I love is that the very beginning is straight out of the manga. It begins in the scrapyard, and Ido going through the scrapyard of trash that falls from Zalem into Iron City, which is the factory town that makes goods and and for Zalem and ships him up there. And Ido is a cyber surgeon, kind of searching for lost body parts or pieces of technology he can use for his clinic to help repair cyborgs. They can go about their daily work in completing work for the factory and for Zalem. And he discovers a cyber body in the rubble of intact human brain encased inside of a cyber core. He takes it home, and it reminds him of his young daughter that he's lost. So he repairs her and proceeds to raise her as his daughter. The story takes place about 600 years into the future. And about 300 years before that, that's when the future kind of became the past, because there was what was called the fall, and technology kind of went away. So technology like Alita hasn't existed in 300 years by this point. So Iron City is the last of the great cities below a floating sort of sky city called Zalem. And people from all over, melting pot of people, have come to live in Iron City. And they all wish they could go up to Zalem, but they can't. That elevator has been torn down since 300 years ago. No one can go up there, so they can only dream about it. This is a little more inviting because even though it's dystopian, you're not seeing it that way because we're seeing it through her eyes. It's very much through the eyes of Alita, this whole movie. She sees the beauty that others there probably can't see. Where Hugo wants to escape and go to Zalem, she's like, what's wrong with this place? And it's like, it's a cesspool. She can't tell. She thinks she sees the beauty in it, and so do we. So the perspective is what's important, and that's what makes her such a special character. She affects everybody that she sees. She affects the city, she affects the citizens, and we all see it through her eyes.
Alita Battle Angel is about a girl who is plopped into the world not knowing who she is or what she is or how the world works. And she has no memory of her past. And she goes on a journey of self-discovery, aided by her builder/father, Ido, played by Christoph Waltz, and her first-time love, played by Keean Johnson, Hugo. So she thinks she's just an insignificant girl. She doesn't feel right in her body. And so she doesn't know her past, so she goes on this journey in order to find out who she is and discover what she is and discover her past. And in the midst of that, discovers that she's not an insignificant girl at all. She is someone actually quite extraordinary. It's this crazy place where everyone is just trying to survive, and everyone is surviving by the skin of their teeth and doing things they wouldn't otherwise do in order to survive. It is very segregated. Everyone down here in Iron City they are the trash. They live in the scrapyard. They are the poor people. They are the people in systemic poverty. And then there's Zalem, which is the floating city in the sky, which is where all of the clean, very elegant, very rich people live. And they drop all of their trash down to Iron City. And that is where Alita comes from. She's dropped through the funnel from Zalem into the scrapyard. And that's where Ido finds her bust. And that's where he takes her home and he rebuilds her. She's definitely a character young girls can look up to, but she's also a character everyone can look up to. I think it's important, especially for young girls, because they're kind of searching now, you know, well, how am I being represented? Alita is a very dynamic girl, and I think it gives girls permission to go, oh, I can be soft and I can be fearless. I can be curious, but I can also learn. I can also go, is that, you know, I can reason myself, I can express myself, and I don't necessarily have to do what everyone's telling me to do. I can make up my own mind with what's being given to me. Watching these two titans collaborate was inspiring because they both have their way of doing things, and they both are, you know, control freaks and want to make the best film, and them coming together in that way was beautiful. When I first saw what Alita was going to look like, it was crazy. It was a very surreal experience for me because every pull, every indent, every scar, every crease, every line, things I wish they didn't put in that are on my face are there. It's like looking at me because every little nuance of my face is there. The technology is so strong. It's a little bit crazy because, you know, I have very deep Incan girl eye sockets. You know, my eyes are very big and then they sit very deep in my head. And when I looked at Alita, I'm like, they put my Incan sockets in there. Like, that's me.
What was very important for me is that, and I think also to the producers and Robert, is that the story has a heart, and the music needed to emphasize the heart of the story. So that was the most important focus. And I immediately got that when I saw the movie, and I said, it's very important. You know, it's so simple when you see a futuristic movie to go all out on really complicated instruments and sound design that make you feel that you're in the future. But if you take that overboard, you might lose the heart of the film, but you might lose the soul of the film. I've been a fan of him since the first movies that he released, like his unconventional style of really gritty movies, and then at the same time doing movies like Spy Kids, where it's very sweet and very lovely, and that interesting mix really interests me. And but especially his view on vision, very forward-thinking. What you can do with cameras, what you can do with acting, what you can do with look and with coloring. Now I saw the film for the first time with JON LANDAU, and we talked about what was important, what was not important. And at that point, James was working on some other stuff next door, and so we walked over there, and John introduced the two of us, and we talked for like 20-25 minutes in general about music, things that are important, and how I'd like to work. And I said, you know, I've seen the movie now. I really want to sink the movie in and just come up with music away from the film. So I'm not going to write immediately to the film. I'm just going to write something, what I think Alita's journey is through this whole film. With Robert and me, it's just a blessing because we understand each other like really well. And in general, I would say he was relatively hands off. He would come in and he would listen to everything, and he was like, man, that's great. That's really great. And then he would have like very specific notes that I just said, like in musical terms, what he would do different. When you work with a team like this, with Robert, with JON LANDAU, Steve Rifkin, James Cameron, you know, when they have something to say, you better listen, because, you know, these guys have, you know, something really interesting to say all the time about what happens in the film. And I'm relatively young in this industry, and for me, it's all about learning and you know, getting all that info from these amazing filmmakers. Because he's a film editor and he remembers every frame of the film, like in detail, and what music is doing to it. And so we would talk for hours on end on each scene. He's also a very talented music editor himself, so he would then show me what he would like better, and I'm just like, wow, interesting. Never thought about that. So it was a very interesting way of working, and we got to an end result like relatively quick, and it was really great to sit with him and just like look at the film through his eyes, like what he finds important and what he doesn't find important. The music is, well, for me personally, music obviously is super important. It becomes the heart of almost like every film. If you take the music out of a film completely, it becomes a completely different experience. And only a few films out there in the past work like that, with absolutely no music there. But for me, music, it gives it like soul, it gives it heart, it gives it tension, it gives it drama, and everything you will.
ジェームズ・キャメロンのね、ターミネーター2、もう超大好きで、もうターミネーター2も何回も本当に何度見たか分かんないぐらい見返して、ターミネーター2の冒頭のシーンとか、もうレーザーディスクとかでこう何回も見直して、どういうふうにこう構成ができているのか、こうなんかそういう物語の秘密をね盗み出そうと一生懸命見たりとかしたんですよ。なもんだからまあキャメロン氏にねこう映画作ってもらったのはものすごく光栄なことですね。でロドリゲス監督のデスペラードとかマーチェーテとかプラネット・オブ・テラーとかまあ超大好きでやっぱりねで、まさかねドルリゲス監督がメガホンを取るとはね聞くまではびっくりしたんですけど、驚いたんですけど、すごく好きな監督であるんで。有田役の人ですか。すごく綺麗ですね。いやね、すでに撮ったテイクちょっと見せてもらいましたけど、CG に変える必要ないんじゃないかと